This is Michael Kaplan from TAGA, and we are lucky enough to be here in New York filming Mike Stern. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We're going to skip a lot of the biographical stuff, and basically, I think a very important question that a lot of musicians have, especially young musicians, is how do you, or how did you develop a voice? Because there's a lot of great guitarists out there, a lot of great musicians all over the world, and I think everybody's searching to get their own voice and sound like themselves. And somebody like yourself, one note, you know, it's Mike Stern. How does that?
It's a good question, and I appreciate that you can hear that. It was something I think for me that just happened over time. You know, just by playing a lot and just kind of getting a sound that I felt comfortable with, kind of a sound in my head, more or less. You always try to go for what you hear, and sometimes you get close, and sometimes it feels like it's very far away. But it's never perfect, I don't think. But then sticking with a certain sound, and then having, I guess, a certain kind of background where I was playing a lot of rock and blues, and then got into jazz later. My mom used to play a lot of jazz records around the house. Originally, I would just play along with rock and blues records. It was mainly diatonic, kind of in one key. And a lot of stuff on the radio, which is mainly soul music. You know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I used to really dig a lot of the tunes that were coming out that were basically Motown and that kind of stuff. So I'd play along with the radio, play along with records, play along with Jimi Hendrix, play along with B.B. King, that kind of stuff, and be able to pick off the licks. When I got into jazz, my mom had a bunch of jazz records that I used to listen to when she played them, you know, around the house. I took some of those records to my room and I got lost immediately. and it's just more intricate, the language, I think, in general. Not to say that that's better or worse, because sometimes the simplest music, whatever gets your heart, is the most important thing. But
maybe it was just that vocabulary was, at least in my experience, the vocabulary was unfamiliar because you're so used to hearing rock and pop. It's a different language.
It's a different language, but it's also more intricate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, in general, there's just more possibilities. Yeah. And like I said, for me, it doesn't make it better or worse, but I certainly dug it. So I wanted to get into it, so I started studying, and just kind of over time, I think I just found a sound, just stuck with it, and kind of found something I like. Sometimes, usually I like a stereo sound. I'm trying to get a kind of a very vocal sound, and that's when I'm trying to get the guitar to sound kind of like a horn or like a singing.
Right. Is it? So it's. I mean, because in addition to to the actual tone, the sound, the gear, there's that you might hear in your head, and you're trying to get that sound. And like you said, you search and you search. You never get it perfect.
Right.
But then there's also the vocabulary, and truth be told, you've developed. Although you have this strong foundation of the rock and of the blues, but you also have a strong foundation of full understanding of the bebop vocabulary, the hard bop vocabulary, and then are able to take that and combine it into your own vocabulary that, quite frankly, you just naturally came up with. That makes you sound like Mike.
I guess it's something like that. Yeah. That's what I would recommend to any students, is just to take different influences. I always tell my students to, I don't really teach rock playing so much, or sometimes cats will ask me, some guy will ask me if how to bend this, how do you do this, how do you get this kind of a sound on it, just by bending a string or whatever, and I'll say, listen to Buddy Guy.
right.
But or Hendrix, that's a little bit more involved, but of course, but generally I teach jazz, all the possibilities for jazz, and I learned so much when I got into the music. I thought, first of all, I would never be able to get fluent with it. I thought, forget it, it's too hard, it's too many chords, it's too much.
You're getting lost in the changes. You don't know where you
No,
are.
I couldn't remember the
Yeah.
changes. I
Yeah.
mean, it was on all the chord scales, the scales that fit with it. And then the more I got into it, the more I said, no matter what, I'm going to just practice as hard as it takes and see if I can get fluent
Yeah.
with this language. That doesn't mean you conquer the world of music just because
No.
you're fluent. In any of these styles, it's endless.
It goes on, yeah,
It's
of
endless.
course.
It's
of
like
course.
it's a voyage that never ends. It's beautiful, but it's a pain in the ass at the same time.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of practice. And you just try to develop whatever potential you have, which generally, in my experience, with teaching for a while and just playing and hearing other people play, and generally there's more potential. With unrecognized potential that everybody has.
Of course.
And it's a question of just working your ass
It's a
off.
question of a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's really, you gotta, as I think I heard John Schofield say, if you want to play jazz, you gotta do the time.
Hey, well, there is a school of thought out there, you hear people say, well, this guy's so talented and this guy's so talented. And in my humble opinion, I think maybe people don't understand the tears and the sweat that goes into playing non-stop. And
Totally.
you might not even consider it practicing. But next thing you know, it's been 8, 10, 12 hours and you've been sitting around playing all day and you can't possibly not get better. You do that. You play 12 hours a day for 10, 20 years. You
Yeah.
can't possibly not become decent at something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of it is just elbow grease. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, I wouldn't say 12 hours, but certainly Miles Davis, who I got a chance to play with years ago, and it was sort of an amazing opportunity. He used to tell me that he used to play and practice a lot, but he used to play a lot.
Right.
When him and Charlie Parker used to play.
And there's a difference.
Sometimes we play for 8 hours. I don't know if that's true,
but there's a difference between practicing and playing.
But they used to kind of practice
Yeah.
and play at the same time. I do the same thing with this bass player that's going to be joining me on this.
In the video.
The video, Edmund Gilmore. We play together a lot, all the time. And I've always had some cats that I like to play with, and we just
hang out and play all day.
Yeah, we play a lot. Not all day, but a lot.
Sure.
Because there's other stuff you got to do.
Yeah.
It's like eating. It's overrated.
Yeah, but we got to do it.
It's overrated, but we got to do it. So, that stuff really helps. And then just, what I do is try to transcribe stuff.
Do you actually write it out, or you just?
I write it.
You do.
Yeah, I used to play along with the easier stuff, and then with jazz, as I said, the vocabulary is more intricate. So
Yeah.
I started writing stuff out and transcribing. The first one I ever did was a Joe Pass solo,
Oh.
and it kicked my ass. I mean, and then I think I wrote it out all wrong, But I did it instead of just getting it out of a book,
Yeah.
and that way I could. It was really helpful because then you really hear what's happening.
Yeah.
But it was elbow grease like crazy. It really took a long time. Then it got better as I did a Jim Hall solo, then a Wes Montgomery
And
solo.
over time, it gets
Over time
easier.
It gets easier. And sometimes you leave stuff out. You can't hear.
Well, yeah. If there's a phrase you just can't hear,
You can't hear.
sure.
You kind of approximate it or whatever. It doesn't have to be like perfect, but you get from doing that, you get a whole lot of choices and vocabulary that just kind of you pick up through osmosis,
Well-
and that's really useful. I think for me, that's useful. I didn't start off with that. I started off at trying to learn, first of all, reading. I didn't know how to read.
So you had to learn just.
I had to learn
I guess
how
what
to
would be
read.
called the basics. Learning how to
I had
read.
to learn how to read English. No, I had to learn how to read.
Yeah.
Music,
Yeah.
and that was very basic. And when I first went to Berklee College of
Yeah.
Music, I was there for 3 years, and I went there for 1 year, and then took a year off, and then went two more years, or maybe I went there 2 years and took a year off, and went 1 more year. I'm not sure. And then I joined Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to do that. So that
You don't
was
turn
the
that
end
down.
Yeah, that was the end of Berklee for me, but it was really a great experience for me. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to get stuff together without some kind of discipline.
Like the theory and the reading and all that stuff.
Which schools are great for.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's like learning a language.
Yeah.
Your music is like
Yeah,
learning a language,
absolutely.
no matter what kind of style you play. And I think ultimately you learn any language by speaking it
Absolutely.
with people that are more
Yes.
fluent in
Yes.
the language. So in this case, you play with cats that'll kick your ass, that are better than you, you know. But to get to that point, sometimes you just have to learn the verb conjugation, the spelling,
basic syntax
the
and
basic
grammar.
stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Just even to get to a point where you can order breakfast, you know.
Yeah.
And that was very much the case with me when I was first learning how to play over standard tunes, over jazz standard tunes. So, or like a minor blues or like a jazz kind of
Right.
blues. It was very much trying to learn, you know, kind of slowly and learn, you know, first of all how to read, that really opened up a lot. And so I was reading all the time. I was practicing.
Yeah.
Doing
You
that
still
as
practice
much as I-
today reading, whether it's
Not as
Bach
much.
stuff or,
yeah,
or
but sometimes I'll transcribe stuff and then read over the solo.
and then read over the solo
Yeah.
later.
I try not to learn the licks so much. I sometimes take a certain line and say this is a cool line, but not the whole solo.
When you do that, let's talk about that about the transcribing and learning a line. So you know you transcribe and you learn a line. In my experience, what I've tried to do or tried to tell students to do is when you learn the line, that's the line, but you need to take that line and manipulate it and say, well, okay, here's a line. Let me see what happens if I start on the upbeat, or if I end it a little
That's
different, or if I bend a note in the
then
middle,
it becomes
or
yours.
and then
you take that kind of idea. It's like reading a book and and you see how somebody maybe you'll coin a phrase from the book. You'll say, wow, that's a cool way to put it. And then you'll find your own. From there, you kind of, it takes you in a different...
And it changes over time.
Then you also learn, if you understand what somebody's trying to say, you kind of say, well, then I can do it like this. So sometimes analyzing, that's why transcribing is so cool. You can see, if you know enough harmony and how somebody will use their melodic statements, you know, harmonically. And if you understand some of that stuff, then you can kind of understand what they're doing, and then not just steal a line or take a line literally, but you'll take the concept exactly and say, well, I can do it this way. And then of course, like I said, you could take any melodic thing and play it with different rhythms and different dynamics.
You know, regarding rhythm, I think a lot of people focus so much on melody and harmony and practicing that stuff, trying to get these lines together, and they perhaps neglect or put on the back seat rhythm. And you know, again, in my opinion, which is probably worth nothing, but
I'm sure
but rhythm,
this guy plays
rhythm comes first. Like if you can have the hippest harmonic line, melodic line, but if it's played with a crappy feel, nobody's going to care.
Well, the thing is, time is time is really the most important thing. And how do you practice time is a good question. Also, sometimes you can practice time by with a metronome, for instance. Sometimes without a metronome, and just kind of keep your own internal feel and tape yourself playing and say, "Oh, I'm rushing here, I'm dragging here." No one's got perfect time. You know, you don't even want it. And sometimes
we want to be able to
elasticity.
Absolutely, organically.
But you want to try to get it in the ballpark. So time is something you just can focus on. Sometimes when I transcribe, somebody like Sonny Rollins or somebody like Joe Pass or somebody like Wes Montgomery, you know, you hear a great time player. Those guys are great time players. They can swing their asses off, and they could, if they were rocking, they could probably rock their asses off. It would just be the feel, and they'd pick some other notes. They'd use a pedal or something, but they would be... Because
they have such a killer time feel.
Exactly. And there's so much, so that's so important. And
you got to play with Brecker, with Michael, who had
amazing time. He had amazing everything.
He had I mean, but his time was
wonderful. And the stuff he could do, and I'm still playing with Randy Brecker, and it's in some ways it's even better. I mean, he swings so hard, Randy. You know, it's really amazing. Those two brothers, the Brecker brothers, are phenomenal musicians, and Mike, who we all miss very much, died a few years ago, and now maybe 10 years ago, something like that, amazing musician who I got to play with.
Absolutely.
And now I'm still playing with his brother, Randy. It's so inspiring to play with people like that. The thing that I learned also is I work really hard at the music and trying to learn because I love it, you know.
Yeah.
And the more you water the flowers, I like that kind of analogy.
The more they grow.
The more they grow.
Yeah.
And the more you love it then, you know.
Well, that's true. It
so
does.
You have to put in a certain, I don't say 12 hours a day, but I'll say like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, something like that. If you can do more, if you're learning some stuff, you get lost in some stuff, go until you drop.
But that's the thing, what you just said was very important. It's not how long consecutively. It's not about 12 hours straight. It's about what's the time in between the last time you played.
Right.
So if you played this morning for 2 hours and you don't play for 3 days, or you don't play till tomorrow, you're talking 24 hours.
Yeah.
It's got to be consistent.
Yeah.
Like you said, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours.
You can get a lot out of 1 hour.
It could be 20 minutes, whatever it is, but it's got
instead of 8 hours on Sunday.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
That's really. We're talking about practicing, really like stuff that you can't really play, not the stuff that you.
That you can already do.
You know, great bass player Lincoln Goins, who I played a bunch with, told me when he teaches, he says, when you start a practice routine, start the stuff that kicks your ass first. Don't start the stuff that you kind of know a little bit.
Well, your brain tricks you because your brain wants you to play stuff that sounds good, so you feel good about yourself. But if you got to start, like you said, you got to go right for it, and that's what a good musician does.
And then that gets better gradually.
Yeah.
And then you on to the next thing that'll kick your ass. You know what I mean? But that's how you grow.
Yeah. Let me ask you.
No gain, all that stuff.
Let me ask you one more question before we get started on this video. I know that you now transcribe, and a lot of piano players, horn players. But is there a guitar player that for you has always been this? That's the guy for me. For me, it's Wes Montgomery.
Yeah.
It's for me. I could put on Wes anytime and just
Wes, I would say for me,
or
Wes
Jim Hall.
Montgomery, Jim Hall, those guys. Certainly younger but younger than them.
Right.
Guys in my generation, it would be obviously John Scofield and Pat Metheny, who I studied with some, and John I played with Miles Davis, and in different circumstances, and they're beautiful. And then Bill Frisell is one of my dearest friends. All these guys are really close.
And they all have their own voices.
Very much their own voices. So. And I think a lot of people ultimately do have their own voice. It's just a question of playing and trying to get out there more, and then you develop your own stuff, I really do. Sometimes it's more subtle, and in some ways it's more obvious that somebody's got their own voice. And in some respects, it's just the luck of the draw because we came along at a time when there was a lot more recording. So people can hear you over and over again. They sort of recognize you.
That's true too.
And so that's some of it. But the main thing is, there's something so beautiful about playing no matter what. If the gigs are hard to get, if the guarantee, there's no guarantee that you're going to get to be able to play with Miles Davis or the Rolling Stones.
Or make a living as a musician even.
Yeah. But the guarantee is that you've got that in your soul. And the older I get, I could not live with this without this.
Without
stuff,
this stuff.
Without this, I couldn't.
I think a lot of people miss that nowadays. They're going for the fame, and they're not playing maybe for the right reason.
Well, there are a lot of people that are, but sometimes it's really difficult.
Yeah, it is.
And it's getting harder.
And it's getting more and more difficult.
To make it work financially. But I was always into this I had no idea where it would take me, but I love it. And the more I got into it, and I had other great teachers that would just say the same thing I'm saying now, basically, is that it's the guarantee is that you have that passion, and the way you keep that, you practice, you water the flowers, and then the odds are, and this is with any kind of profession, the more you put into it, the more chances you're going to be able to make some bread, either by teaching, by playing gigs you might not want to play. Sometimes you play gigs that you do want to play, and then one thing leads to another. But you'll have the music. No one can take it away from you except you. If you don't put the heart and soul into it,
you get nothing back.
Yeah, you get nothing back.
But you put enough in, and you get it back.
You definitely.
Because, like you said, something you have your whole life, and really, what else would you rather be doing?
Nothing.
Right? So,
Well, there's a couple other things, but we won't go into that right
hey, thanks, but let's do this video.
Thank you,
Thanks, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
absolutely.
Once again, this is Michael Kaplan from TAGA with Mike Stern, and we're going to get this video started. Stay tuned.